And so the world is going to witness now a confrontation between the oppressor and the champions of the oppressed. It's going to be nuclear war. And we are not afraid to die. And that's all I have to say. We are not afraid to die. Perspective again is that of Islamic eschatology. And as a consequence, I must direct attention to the prophecy of Prophet Muhammad, Allah's blessings be upon him, who prophesied an end-time conquest of Constantinople. And that end-time conquest of Constantinople comes after the great war that the Christians call Armageddon and the Muslims call the Malhama. And if anyone believes that the Armageddon or the Malhama has already occurred, he should buy a one-way ticket to the moon. No, it has not as yet occurred. It's still to come. And the conquest of Constantinople takes place after that. So Sultan Muhammad Fatih's conquest of Constantinople in 1452 or 53 is not the fulfillment of the prophecy of Prophet Muhammad. The Turkish people, the Bosnian people, the people of Albania and Kosovo and Macedonia and others who have been brainwashed into believing that that is the fulfillment of the prophecy, I tell you, you got homework to do because you've been misled. I ask myself, why would this occur in the end time? What strategic importance can there be in a conquest of Constantinople, prophesied not only in Islamic eschatology but also in Christian eschatology? And Stephen, my answer is, and this is my answer, you don't have to agree with me, is that the conquest of Constantinople has only one military importance. And that is that it would free the Bosphorus and the Straits of Dardanelles for the Russian Navy. At this time, it's a NATO-controlled waterway. But a conquest of Constantinople would break the back of NATO. And as a consequence, the Russian Navy would be able to pass through to the Mediterranean. That is the only military significance I can see. Why would a navy be so important? Perhaps in a post-nuclear world, we will not have any more aircraft. And that wars in a post-nuclear world will be fought on the land and in the sea. If this is going to be the reason for the conquest of Constantinople, then Crimea assumes an importance unparalleled. Because Crimea is the warm water port of the Russian Navy. My eschatological analysis is that the mastermind who wants to rule the world from Jerusalem already knew this. And so he used, and this will come out in my subsequent lectures on Gog and Magog, he used Gog and Magog to empower the Ottoman Empire. with a power that could not be destroyed by any Christian army. So when Orthodox Christianity met the Ottoman Empire in the Battle of Kosovo, there was no way at all that the Christian army could ever have been successful. None. Because you're fighting Gog and Magog. You're not fighting Islam. No. It was as a consequence of the success of the Ottoman armies that the Tatar was sent to Crimea. And eventually the Ottoman Empire took Crimea. Ottoman control over Crimea is part of eschatology. It is meant to prepare the way to deny Russia the capacity to pose any naval threat in the end time. When Russia defeated the Ottoman Empire and took Crimea, it meant that there was an obstacle in the way. And they had to devise ways and means to try to get Russia out of Crimea. For 200 to 300 years, they could not do it. And Russia remained a naval power with a naval base in Crimea. And then they brought about the Crimean War, in which it was the last great war fought before modern weapons came. The last great war. And in that war they gave everything that they could give to defeat Russia, to deny Russia Crimea. And they succeeded, eventually. Russia paid a terrible price. The number of people who died. The Russians fought and fought valiantly and courageously, but eventually they had to surrender. And the terms of the surrender, I think the treaty was in Paris, was that Crimea would remain under Russian sovereignty but would be demilitarized. Russia denied Crimea as a naval base, which is what they wanted. But they planned their plan, and the Lord God plans his plans, and I think it was within 7 or 9 years, and Russia was able to turn the tables and get back Crimea as a naval port. So then they had to devise yet another scheme to deny Russia Crimea. And that scheme was the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917, and the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union came into being, then Ukraine was born. There was no Ukraine before. And in 1953, 53 or 54, 6 years after Israel was born, Nikita Khrushchev suddenly, mysteriously, ominously mysteriously, announced that Crimea was going to be given to Ukraine. He never consulted the Russian people. He never got their permission. He never consulted the people of Crimea. He never got their permission because he was acting on behalf of Dajjal. And once Crimea was given to Ukraine, the next step was to dismember the Soviet Union, and Crimea would emerge as an independent state. Russia would now have a treaty with Crimea limiting its use of the naval base. Yes, Ukraine would now become an independent state, and Ukraine would have a treaty with Russia limiting the use of the naval base. And then the next step after that would be, with Ukraine as an independent state, for Ukraine to become a member of NATO, and then Russia's goose is cooked. If Ukraine becomes a member of NATO and Crimea belongs to Ukraine, Russia's goose is cooked. But they planned their plan, and the Lord God planned his plans. And when they had the bogus color revolution in Kiev, within 2 weeks, Crimea was back where it belonged in the first place, to Russia. As soon as Russia regained Crimea, Russia is a nuclear power. Russia is able to project nuclear power around the Black Sea. And the geostrategic implications were enormous. And so this is why I've said the Zionist movement suffered its greatest loss in its entire history. From the day the Zionist movement was established in Basel in 1897 to this day, the greatest loss that the Zionist movement has ever suffered was the loss of Crimea. And so the events in Ukraine are to be understood from our eschatological perspective as directed primarily to the importance of Crimea and Russia's role in the end times to be the naval power in a post-nuclear world. Now that Russia has regained Crimea, the pieces are already in place, the nuclear war is coming, and we know what's going to happen after that. Don't think it's necessary for us to go back to repeat what are the causes for this exodus of refugees. It's well known. Amongst them is the armed insurrection in Syria.